What's up, Alex? Dude, I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be a ton of fun.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to dive into the topic of mental toughness and how people can transform their lives by changing the way they think and kind of what goes on inside their head. But can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got to this point where you're now coaching people on taking these steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So background on me, I have a past in construction, real estate, no college degree, straight out of high school, went into construction. And from there, had the patterns of being around guys who were pretty rough and gruff, drank a lot, did all the wrong things for me at the time. So I fell into those traps for a long, long time, and that's the way I was brought up. So lots of drinking, lots of partying, having a good time. First guy at the party, last guy out. So that was kind of who I was for the majority of my adulthood. And I got into real estate. I had three kids, and I was about 5 years into real estate, and feeling like I was just on this roller coaster of like good months, bad months, good months, bad months, the sales cycle. And I'd find myself, drinking at least 4 nights a week. And I was always on with my fitness. But when you're doing that, you're never being your best self. Right. So
Huge hurdle to overcome for sure.
huge, huge, huge. And so, and I've always had this mental want for more in my life, but also thought that some people just had it, right? And maybe I just didn't have it. And so, the defining moment for me, which is a little odd for some people, um, I'd been listening to Andy Frisella and the MFCEO podcast, and 75 Hard came out. I think it was March of 2019. And I was listening to the podcast and I was like, man, I think that would change my life. Like, I should do that. But I've got this thing this weekend, and then we're going out of town the next week, and so I can't commit. So we fast forward a few weeks, and April 1st, Nipsey Hussle dies. And I'm a huge hip hop head, and he always talked about owning real estate, generational wealth, what he's going to leave behind, and only surrounding yourself with the right people. And I was like, dude, if I just resonated with me for a couple weeks of like, if I were to die today, like I'd just leave my family with debt. It'd be saddled in debt and like not have anything. And my wife would suffer, my kids would suffer. What would my legacy be? How would my kids remember me? And so that started the thought of like, okay, I'm gonna do this 75 hard. And finally, May 4th, 2019, I woke up from a night of heavy drinking, and it was a Sunday, and I woke up and I was like, I'm starting 75 hard today. And I started it, um, and I did not fail all the way through. My wife, about 10 days in, she was like, are you really going to do this? Like, 2 workouts a day? And like, where does our family fit in? And I'm like, I have to do this for us. Like, I need your support. She supported me 100%. And about that 10, 11, 12 day was like the point of breakthrough where I was like, I was on a run and just uncontrollably like sobbing. Like, the person that I was is not who I am. And I have to stop. I have to stop telling the story of who I was to myself and to everyone else, because it's just an excuse for who we currently are, right? We can change who we are at any point in our life, at any hour of any day. We can make the decision to change. And so that was the turning point for me. 75 days, went through about a 3 week gap. My wife saw the transformation I went through, wanted to start 75 hard. So I started with her again 3 weeks later. So in the course of, 100 and about close to a half a year, I was on 75 hard and just grinding. Our business grew 380% in the next 12 months. Uh, my marriage grew immensely. My relationship with God grew tremendously. My relationship with my kids, I eliminated all of the partying. I eliminated all the social aspects I didn't need in my life. Um, and so it really painted a clear picture of what my life needed to look like to be the man that I needed to be for my family and for my future greatness. So that was
I,
really my catapult.
I love it. Using 75 hard is kind of the catapult into the man you know you needed to be. And I
Yes,
like you
sir.
said about talking about stories, telling yourself stories, because that's kind of what I kept hearing when you were like, some people have it, I don't have it. Like I'm going to start setting up hard, but not this weekend, and next weekend out of town, and then something else is going on. It's like a lot of stories you were saying to yourself that helped you, like, kind of, and you put it really well when you said like it helped you stay trapped, and it was just an excuse.
Yep.
Because if the stories are true, then it's not your fault. It's not on
100%.
you. It's because you
Yeah.
don't have it, and that's just, oh, that's too bad. So,
Yeah.
like, okay, you mentioned like running down the street and sobbing and kind of hitting this breaking point, and that's interesting because when I run, I sob too, but for a different reason. But like, what was that like? And what was the like, what was the story you started telling yourself in that moment about who you could become, and like, how did that kind of put you in a position to make those changes?
Yeah, so I was listening to Ed Milet a lot in his early podcast where it was really just before he interviewed people, it was just him talking into the mic. Like he does those every now and again now, but they were so different back then. And it was really him like hitting home with the you are not the person that you are not you are not the things that happen to you. You are not the things that you were brought up to believe you are. You are whoever you want to be in life, and you are whoever God created you to be. So go get it. And in that moment, I knew that all of this crap that I was telling myself was not true. It was not me. It was maybe who I had been brought up to be in the situations I put myself in had created this monster inside of me and the person that I did not want to be. That's why I tried to escape through alcohol, tried to escape through um, other other things. The escapism from my life was because I was unhappy with the story I was telling myself. And so in that moment, it was like, okay, I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to commit to the work. And that's all that matters right now because I know the work will create the man that I need to be.
Mm, that's good. I like that. And I like what you talked about in terms of like using alcohol and some other of those like numbing devices as an escape mechanism. Because like when I talk to people about nutrition and they're saying, I'm having these cravings, I want these sorts of things, I was like, hey, your cravings are your teacher. Like those are the times when you need to really pay attention. Because like when I think a lot of us resonate with that. We are pushing ourselves away using like porn or weed or alcohol to get out of our own head so we don't have to like sit there and be with ourselves because we don't like the stories we're telling ourselves. But I think that if you can just take a second in those moments when you're like, I just want to do something else. I just want to drink right now. I just want whatever. And you can be like, well, why? What about this moment is making me feel like I need to be numb or need to be something else? And I think if you can actually be honest with yourself in those moments, that can be one of those, like those moments that you described of like running down the street and sobbing and being like, that's not who I am, and making those changes. So yeah, that's powerful.
Amen, man. So I trained myself to like when I get into those moments of like wanting to wanting to have a drink or wanting to smoke or do whatever it is, I would go to my computer and I would start working. So I
Okay.
took work and I put work in place of those. So I expanded my hours of work drastically because I was not using that time in other ways. The 3, 4 hours I would spend at happy hour then was being pushed towards work. Or I'd go out and I'd go, okay, now's time to put on the gear and go for a run. So I'd go for a 45-minute run, listen to a podcast. So putting good stuff into my ears and into my head rather than going out for a drink and then coming back from that, journaling, getting all my thoughts down
Mm,
on paper. So everything was
interesting.
an exercise to become the better human that I needed to be. It was a
And
full immersion.
it's not like you just were like, I'm going to stop drinking. You literally went out and replaced it with something healthy. So you replacing
Mhm.
rather than removing, which I think is something that's like a really great like actual tactic that you can use. But the journaling takes it up a notch because you're taking those what you're kind of discovering about yourself and you're synthesizing that knowledge and you're forcing it to actually like become concrete in your mind.
100%. And
I've
what's
not done that. That feels like something that I could easily I should add in.
Oh, dude, it's a game changer because what's written is retained, right? So if you
Mhm.
take that time where your brain is just on fire and you go
Mhm.
straight from a hard cardio activity and you've been thinking, or you're listening to a podcast and you've got thoughts coming up, dive in for 20 minutes and just start writing. Like, don't try and get into like paragraph mode or like just thoughts, big goals, ambitions, whatever it is, put it on paper and then go back to it and revisit it, underline it, reread it. Because when we put those thoughts on paper and we go back and read them over and over, they become reality. You train your brain to believe that those things are real that you've written on paper. They're no longer dreams. When you've got dreams in your head, God put those thoughts in our head for a reason. They are there to be manifested. And without us putting it on paper and going back to them and continually looking at them so that we have something to attain in the future, they're just dreams. So we've got to go through that process. And that process is taking the vision, putting it on paper, rereading it, going over it, and then acting on it. Acting. Going back to it. Okay, I did that. What's the next step? Expanding your mind more because once you put all that on paper and you get to a point where you have started to get to those places, your mind gets expanded so much bigger because you have become that person. And then through this work, I've already become this person. What can I become next? And so then it just starts triggering everything bigger and bigger and bigger. And it really starts to change your brain and your training of your brain to realize what is really possible for you in your life.
I love that. And like there's a couple of thoughts that keep coming up, like when you're talking about it. Number one is, be careful who you surround yourself with. You mentioned earlier being in construction and having guys around you who had all these vices, and obviously you just fell into that, right?
Yeah.
And then I like you didn't say it, but like you're listening to Ed Milet, and like so Ed Milet's now like one of your top fives in your circle, right? And so you're
Yeah.
letting his thoughts and some of those positive things, and then what I was even thinking is like when you're journaling and you're coming off of a high from running or whatever, which is always when your brain is just kind of at its peak and you're writing stuff down and then now you're taking your own best possible version of yourself and you're funneling that back through your mind. So I think that like, A, replace, don't remove, although some of those vices, but B, really be careful who you're surrounding yourself with and use some of like the best people online, the podcasts and your own best version of yourself to be that person, to create an example for yourself. Powerful.
100%. 100%.
Love that.
We have we this little device makes it possible for us to become quasi friends with people by surrounding yourself with them through their words in your head every day. So if you can do that and not just take those words in and just listen to them, but take action on those things, on the things that they are putting out there for you to use and become the better you, if you actually do that and you take those thoughts and you take your thoughts, put them on paper, what you think about what they said, however that resonates with you, and you go back to it, I guarantee you will become a better person. You will hit new goals, hit new strides in life, whatever it is. I don't care if it's more money, a better relationship with your wife, fitness, you name it. You can have it all. Every single bit of it. My fitness has gotten better. My relationship with my wife has gotten better. My relationship with my kids has gotten better. My relationship with God's gotten better. My bank account's gotten bigger. Everything in my life has exploded because I made a decision to change.
And then you took action on it, which I think is
100%.
that's
You have, action is undeniable. It's the one thing that if you do not take action, if you just take things in and do not take action, nothing will ever happen for you. Ever.
Do you know what my shirt means? It says facta non verba on it. Do you know what that means?
Act, don't speak.
Actions, not words in Latin. Yeah.
Actions, not words. Yes.
Yeah.
I was close.
I got it tatted too, just so I can never forget now.
I love it.
So we were talking before we started recording about kind of what comes first, the physical or the mental change.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned doing something very physically difficult is what kind of is a catalyst for the mental change.
For sure.
But I think that when you're doing something that's challenging on a physical perspective and you complete it, let's say you did 75 hard, you did 2 workouts a day, 45 minutes, one inside, one outside. And then like the words you said was, what can I become next? And I think that, one of the best things I've ever done for myself was have a physical fitness habit. And I think that's why I'm a decent entrepreneur now, because I saw what I was able to accomplish through years of continual, consistent effort from a physical perspective. And then I was like, well, now I just apply that same mentality to business, relationships, family, whatever else it is. And then once you start seeing the physical success, whether that's like I dropped a bunch of weight, I've gained a bunch of muscle, I can do a bunch of pull-ups now, whatever that looks like, you start believing in yourself. And then you think, what can I become next? If I told myself stories about my weight or my fitness levels or whatever before, and I've transcended those stories, well, where else can I see that growth and manipulate that in my own life? So I think that, can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that you've used the physical health to pursue the mental toughness?
For sure. So I think through fitness and through what we put ourselves through in the gym, on a run, whatever it is that you do for your fitness, when you're really pushing yourself to the limit, you're starting to understand what you can go through and what you're capable of, right? So you look back at your progression from when you started to when you got to wherever. Let's say I'm going to take, for my own example, I was training for triathlons, and my split times were terrible for running. So I decided to start running. And I kept just going, okay, I'm going to cut 5 seconds down on my split time today. So I would go out and I'd push myself, and then I'd measure the metric. And then the next time I'd do the same and I'd measure the metric. And I went from, a 9:12 pace down to a 7:02 pace in this amount of time. And it's a measurable, right? And you go, damn, that's exciting. Like that excites me. Now you take those same disciplines and you put those into your everyday life. And you go, okay, I've got to make 20 calls today. And well, instead of making 20 calls, I'm going to make 22 calls. So you increase by 10%. And all of a sudden, after 6 months, you've made X amount more calls, 10% more calls than you would have. So your metric is going to go up on how many conversions you're going to have naturally because you're doing more action, right? So I think anytime that we look at our fitness and we see what we have been able to attain, and we can take it and go, okay, I'm going to put XYZ more into my business. I'm going to take and put this much more effort into my calls. You're going to see those fruits just like you would in your fitness. But it's all about being disciplined towards those things, right? You can't fall off for 2, 3 days and come back and expect you're going to have the same consistency because you lose momentum. And so,
Momentum's huge. And then and coming back is always harder than staying on.
dude, that's why I don't take time off from the gym. Swear to God, it's a it it hurts me to not go to the gym just because it's a habit, it's habitual for me now. But taking time off and then coming back, like, dude, it's painful. Your body adapts to not going, and then you come back and you're like, God, my muscles hurt so bad. This
Oh yeah,
sucks.
that leg day, that first leg day back after 6 weeks
Oh,
off is the worst.
oh no,
I think it was like
thank you.
Rich Piana even said something about like he works out 7 days in a row, even though he should take a rest day because he
Hmm.
knows if he didn't go seven, that day back he would then it would be 2 days off, then it would be 3 days off, then it's 2 months, you know. So
Well, I mean,
yeah,
Rich could do that when he was pumping himself full of
yeah,
everything known to man.
everything, yeah. Okay, so going from a 926 split to a 702 split, that's great,
Yeah,
and it feels good
yeah,
when you see that.
yeah.
But that's not just like going and doing it, right? You have to push yourself in the moment, which sucks. You know, getting an extra 5 pounds on your squat or whatever, like doesn't feel good. How do we train
No.
ourselves to enjoy and if not enjoy, endure that experience?
So it's not enjoyment. Like I didn't enjoy, there wasn't a second of enjoyment out of looking down at my watch while I was running and going, oh shit, my pace is low. Like I gotta crush it, and my VO2 is just through the roof, and I'm dying, and my diaphragm hurts, and my legs want to give out. But I'm doing these speed trainings to try and increase my times, and dude, there's no bit of it that I liked, but I knew I had set a goal for myself. So I had to get there. And so we have to put ourselves through a certain amount of hell in order to train our brain to know what we are capable of. Because if you don't get there, if you don't get to that point of pain, you'll never truly know what you are capable of. And so you have to get to that pain threshold. Some people, I've heard it called the pain cave. How long can you last in the pain cave? And when you get there and you're in that personal hell, how long can you go through that? And I think that's something that most people aren't willing to endure. And if you aren't willing to endure it, you will never truly know how great you can be.
I kind of like to dissociate when I'm in like those moments, and I like to pull back and be a little bit like, how much pain can I put this other person through? Like those last couple seconds on the assault bike or whatever you're doing that sprint
Yeah.
or trying to finish out. I try to be like, if I was in a third party scenario, if I'm training this person, how hard can I push this other person and then inflict that on myself? And I feel like playing some games like that can help me do it. Or you're finishing out like a set of 10 on your lat pull downs or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, that's 10, and you're like, this is really burning. Okay, you need to do two more. Like it
Yes.
sucks to be you. Do two more. And then I'm like, well, this really is hard. I'm like, well, then you need to slow down, make it suck more. Like
Mhm.
how do you inflict suffering on yourself in a way that keeps it? I don't know. I think you got to develop some of those masochistic tendencies in order to really be able to know what you're capable of at the highest level.
So there's two things that I do, and they're very
Mm-hmm.
opposites of each other. One, I go into kind of a what I call a psychotic mode where I get this crazy smile on my face because I know that if I smile, it elicits different dopamine reactors in your head, and you can instantly do more. So if you like just grit and bear it and smile, all of a sudden the weight gets lighter. So put a
Makes me
smile
think
on
of
your face.
David Goggins talking about taking souls.
Just totally, yes. And then secondarily, like Jesus Christ, my Savior, man, 100%. Without him, I would not be here. And I think while I'm going through that pain, the pain that he suffered on the cross for me and for my life, is nothing, what I'm going through is nothing compared to what he went through for me to save me. And that helps me get through absolutely any pain I could ever imagine.
I love that. So having a little bit of like those two different sides, the perspective shift, and then also just like, here we go. You
Yep.
a little weird, get a little crazy with it.
Yeah. 100%.
So obviously this mental strength and mental toughness is important to develop. I feel like as men, I think we just need to have that. But I want to dive into what that means from a family perspective. Because when you first started 75 hard, your wife's like, well, how does a family fit into this 2 workouts per day? Like, you're like, no, I'm doing it for you. And then the really cool thing is that you didn't tell her to do it. You didn't say, hey, babe, you gotta jump in on this with me. You gotta hold me accountable, right? You did it. She watched you do it, and then she was like, I want some of that.
Yeah.
And I talk to so many dudes, especially, who are like, I need a partner. I need someone to just like show up at the gym that's going to be there at 6 a.m. waiting for me. And I was like, no, you need to be that dude.
Yeah.
Bring someone along, but you're the partner. You're the accountability. You set the standard in your life. You set the standard for your family. And I think that, there's so much talk out there and not enough action, like we were speaking about. But when you want your kids or your spouse or someone else to take a action, the best possible thing you can do is set the example. Can you talk a little bit about how that's translated, what you've seen in your own life and your family and their development around mental toughness?
For sure. Yeah. You have to be the example. You can't talk about it. There's no amount of words that you can speak towards it if you aren't living it that will make your kids, your family, your community, anybody believe that you are that person without being that person. So you have to just step into it and become that person. And you'll never become that person without just stepping in 1 foot at a time and doing the work. So it's just taking that first step. And for most people, it's just getting to the gym. So get your butt to the gym. Like you said, I need somebody to show up. And no, you don't. You need to just get there. And then you need to suffer through your workout. And then you need to go home, go through your day, and get up the next day and do it again. Because those are the things that build the character, that build the example. And so through doing that and through the last 5 years of really, you know, I don't like saying putting myself through it because it's just how I live. None of it's hard to me anymore because it's become so habitual that it's all just who I am. And so my kids see that every day. They see me train all the time. They hear the words that I speak to them. I've got one in club baseball, another one in club swim, and another one in gymnastics. And so we talk about doing the hard things all the time. And you will never uh, outwork somebody who is willing to work harder than you. And so you have to put the work in. And if you aren't willing to put the work in, you will not get the best reward there is. And so if you want the greatest things in life, you have to be willing to work for them. And so I do that by leading by example through my workouts, through the work that we've done, the words that me and my wife speak to our kids. And you just have to be the example to your family every single day. I take my boys into, we have a garage gym at our house, and
Nice.
we'll set up on a Saturday and say, hey boys, we're doing 5 sets of 100 lunges and 20 push-ups in between. So let's roll. And I'll go and they'll do it with me. And they're 13 and 11 and they're crushing 500 lunges and 100 push-ups and getting after it. So but if you are the example, they want to be you. Your kids want to be you. And your wife wants to look at you as the warrior, the one who provides for them, and the one who's there for them. Well, it's hard to guarantee you're going to be there for them if you don't have your health. And through your health, if you are being the best person that you can health wise and doing all these things that create discipline, everything else in your life comes together and rounds out.
And if you were sitting on the sidelines with a milkshake, telling your kids to do 500 lunges and 100 push-ups or whatever, they're going to look back on that experience when they're 20 and be like, "Dad was such an asshole."
A
But they're
hundred
there with
percent.
you, with you're there doing it, or you're pushing yourself harder than them. They're going to look back on that experience so much differently because, like I said, they're like they want to be you. You're a superhero to them. And I've heard that, like, as you know, when our kids are little, how we talk to them becomes their internal dialogue.
Yeah.
So,
I
you
had
know, go ahead.
I had a football coach in middle school. His name was Bama, and
Of course, it was
uh,
Bama.
guy was like 450 pounds, massively overweight, and just yelled at everybody. Could barely move. And the amount of disgust I had for him as a player was like, dude, you couldn't raise your feet off the ground to do these leg raises. Like, but I didn't have the level of respect because I knew he could not do what he was telling us to do, not for a second. And I think that's a big thing from like a Coach Saban aspect. Dude, he's what, 72 years old? Last year he's out running sprints with the guys. You look at a Pete Carroll, same thing. He's out running with the guys, throwing passes. Like people, guys respect guys like that because they're out there with them, still doing these things into their 70s. I want to be that guy. I've said I want to be the guy on the beach at 75 with a six pack. That's who I want to be. So I have to keep this going in order to do that. I got 33 years to go. We'll see how ripped I can stay, but that is my goal.
That's awesome. And I think that have that long-term perspective also can be really helpful because, you know, that's not gonna, it's not something you can just start up doing when you're 72 and expect to see some good
No,
results there.
no, man, definitely not.
But I love the story about the coach though, because like we know a fraud when we see it. Like the biggest thing that my kids call me out on all the time is hypocrisy. They can smell hypocrisy a mile away, and they do
Uh-huh.
not like it. Like it's very aversive to them. So it's hard for me to be like, be nice to your sister and then like be mean to their mom, right? Or like you should really
Yeah,
eat your vegetables. Well, I just am crushing French fries and like a Diet Coke, right? It's like it's no one has any respect for that kind of behavior. So I think that, like, you know, to your point earlier of like you got to be at the gym, you got to be the guy. Like we can't build like a nation of leaders of fit, healthy people who are actually, you know, going to improve the quality of our families, of our communities, et cetera, without being the example. And I love that you're in Phoenix because like I was in New York this past weekend and we walked like 30,000 steps a day. Me and my buddy, we're doing the tours thing. But we're looking around at people in New York, everybody's like thin and hot. And they're like nobody drives. Everyone's walking all the time. But
yeah,
like you see people here in Arizona, it's a much more sedentary community because the you know the streets aren't built for walking and it's not like a walk friendly city. So like looking at some of these statistics, we're supposed to be 50% overweight by 2030 with a quarter, like 25% people being obese, right? There are more fitness professionals and supplements and stuff available now than there's ever been in the history of the entire world. And somehow we're fatter, weaker, softer. Like this is a wake up call. We need to like be better. We need to do better. And I think that like, you know, start with our city, right? Like start with
hmm,
Phoenix. Like
yeah,
I'm calling the people out of Phoenix right now to do better, to be the example. I want to show people in other places, other locations, what's possible. And it starts with just taking that personal accountability. And I think being the one to show up at the gym, and then you invite the friend, then you accountability partner, then you bring your spouse, not the other way around.
totally. And I think, with those numbers, Big Pharma now steps in with things like Ozempic, and they're just trying to pump everybody full of drugs to combat obesity when that doesn't combat the problem. Because with that comes, yeah, you're losing weight, but half of that weight is muscle loss. So you're losing weight, but half of your weight is muscle loss. And we know from data that long term health is dependent on muscle mass and bone density. So if you're losing your muscle mass, it's going to likely decrease your longevity of life. So how are you really doing yourself any favors? You're not. So
And also, what are you learning?
ditch
What are you teaching?
you're learning nothing. You're learning that if you inject yourself with this drug, you're going to lose weight, but you're not helping your metabolism because as soon as you go off, now you have less muscle, so you have a lower metabolic rate. So you're just going to balloon back up. So you have to take healthy habits into account. You have to decide to make change, to cut. Decide means to cut off. You have to decide to cut certain things out of your life, to make change, to become disciplined, even if it's not hugely disciplined. Cut one thing out. Start with one thing and then eliminate another until you get to a point where you're at a healthy lifestyle. Not a lot of people. I'm an all or nothing guy. So I decide to eliminate everything at once. And it works for me, but it doesn't work for everybody. So start small, but you have to start eliminating things from your life in order to become better.
Yeah, and you're right about the decision. You got to make the decision because I think that it comes down to like that mental toughness you've been describing. Because yes, food quality is worse, and yes, everything's cooked with seed oils and all these things, but there are fit people out there, which means that it's attainable, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be a little bit more hardcore than we've ever had to be before. And in a land where everyone is driven by comfort, that's getting harder and harder and harder. So so we talked about like a lot of people think, well, I got to be mentally tough before I can be physically tough. And I think that while mental toughness is the key, I think like we talked about, you build it through the physical resilience and the like
Mm-hmm.
physical tough things. And not everyone wants to be a triathlete or even like, run a marathon, but I think there still needs to be a physical practice where you're challenging yourself. I
For
don't think there's
sure.
a way around that.
No, and I don't run as much as I used to. I'm more of a gym rat. Um, I love going to the gym, but I don't care if you decide to do if starting off you're doing 100 push-ups and 100 air squats. Like get your body moving. Body like I literally posted it this morning. Moving your body creates it elicits dopamine receptors. It puts you in a better mood. It makes you make better decisions throughout the day. So all these people are saying they're depressed, they're not happy with their life. Well, what are you moving your body at all? Are you sedentary? Are you in your car half the day? Like what do you sit at a desk all day long? You can't expect to be happy doing those things. So you have to go out and move your body, and doing small changes, even going for a walk for 30 minutes, will change the way that you react to things throughout the day and the decisions that you make.
Boom. Motion creates emotion. 100% right about that.
True, 100%.
Alex, I would love this conversation. This is awesome. You're like, I think I wish there was more conflict and I disagreed with you more because that makes for better like Instagram clips later. But I've been 100% on board with everything you've been saying.
I
So how
love
can
it.
people connect with you, follow you on social, or talk? Can you talk about your 90-day program?
Yeah, so 90-day program really dives into all the things that are causing you to think the way that you think through the first 15 days of the program. So we do a deep dive and really figure out what it is that we need to start stripping away from your life in those 15 days. And then it's 75 days of implementation through fitness, through diet, through family time, through your faith, through your financial practices, everything to get you in line and really being extremely strict for those 75 days and then a maintenance plan thereafter. So that's really how we roll. And you can connect with me at the Alex Smith on Instagram. That is my biggest platform, and that's about it, man.
Amazing, dude. Thank you so much for your time today and coming onto the show to chat with us about this. I think this is a
Absolutely.
real critical topic that doesn't get spoken about often enough.
Yeah, man. I want everybody to